I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. Welcome to another edition of I Mix What I Like. I mixwhatilike.org at I Mix What I Like for all your relevant social media. Again, I'm Jared Ball, happy to play host once again. And it's been too long since we last spoke in an interview, but I'm happy to again be joined by Sommer McCoy. Dear Summer, online, and curator, among many other things, curator of the Mixtape Museum, which we'll get to and talk about a little bit. But I wanted to talk with her again with the anniversary of Justo Faison's passing. Take this opportunity to commemorate him, talk about him, but also what I've always thought was an underappreciated facet of hip hop history, the mixtape in general. So, Summer, welcome back to the program. Welcome. Good to see you again.
Thanks for having me. It has been too long.
Yeah, way too long. And we met years ago, indirectly, virtually, however you want to call it, around this mixtape, just the history of the mixtape and our collective love and work for the mixtape. Before we get into anything else, could you just talk a little bit about the history of the mixtape? What is the mixtape historically, and maybe what it has become, and more specifically, its importance to hip hop?
Yeah, so I just want to start off by saying, how we met was very intentional. Because I looked you up because I found your dissertation. And it was it was like I was still working in the music industry and going into academia, and I started exploring JSTOR and academic journals, and I was like, oh, okay. So I said, okay, let me see if there's any hip hop in there. Anything about mixtapes? And I found your dissertation, and it literally was one of the pivotal moments in my brain as I was thinking up the Mixtape Museum. And I said, I'm going to, and you replied. So thanks for replying.
Of course.
It actually helped pivot how I thought about a mixtape at the time. Having been in the music industry and worked with hip hop artists, we use the mixtape to promote our music. Similar to social media, you want to know what artists are doing, who they're collaborating with, do they have shows coming up, they may give shout outs or whatever, kind of like social media, Yeah. But prior to artists, DJs were recording their live sets and then distributing them using the cassette, right? The cassette is and they were able to sustain themselves with mixtapes. So if you weren't at the club the night before, you were able to relive it by listening to Brucey B, Kid Capri, maybe Jazzy Joyce, and then you could copy it because you might have had a boombox, and then you could along.
And we're talking about the 1970s, just so we're clear, right? We're the early 70s on is basically right. Yeah.
I would say early 70s, you're getting into park jams or a little closer to the 80s. I was born in 77, so I just want to how I think of things is I was born, and then so you actually, but even before the clubs, you did have neighborhood parties or park jams that were being recorded just because someone was I want to record it, and again, there's that opportunity to copy it and share it, and even, I think about park jams, which I did not really get to experience because I wasn't born, just sitting at a barbecue, with family and just imagining recording that. So you're not just getting the music, but you're getting people talking, you know what I mean? Anyway.
The whole ambiance, the whole, right, beyond just the music. Right.
Video, right? So, then there's our personal interactions with the cassette, right? And making mixtapes. I spent a lot of time as the only child in my bedroom, recording off the radio or like recording from, like, I remember the moment that I got a radio that had 2 cassettes and not just one.
Oh, that was a big deal. Oh, I remember that vividly. That was huge.
It changed my life. And then even for me before that, like I was a ballerina. I would practice using like tapes that my teacher would make, you know? So that was my personal experience with tapes. And I think a lot of people, most people I talk to, relive, you know, the care and the time and the dedication that goes into recording, because there's no backsies. You have to go all the way back. Like there's no, you know.
And there was no Pro Tools and you know, Adobe and all of that. I mean, it was the pencil and the thing, you know, to save the tape and getting it to the right spot and the pause, record, all of that. And I mean, it was a lot of work.
Like waiting for the commercial to like, you know, try to catch the beginning of the song. I spent a lot of time like.
And being mad at the disc jockeys who did their job well, but could speak all the way up to the lyrics. Like the whole introductory, whatever would be them. This is the hot new, blah, 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 and then right as the lyrics start, you're like, dang, man.
Yeah. So I think, I mean, when I have conversations with people about like mixtapes, they're like, they get happy. They only get sad when they're like, oh, I threw them all away. Which, yeah, that's a common story.
I'm guilty. I have my own,
Yeah.
And a lot of times, unfortunately, it's associated with a move. And in that moment of stress, you're like, this is not as important. Correct. But I've made a mistake. For me, it was a mistake. It's a mistake.
Yeah.
But you know, I just always like to highlight that it's important to remember, like, this is before, you know, hip hop was not always welcomed on the radio. It was not always welcomed as a commercial vehicle for selling products. It was not welcomed even on Black radio. So to hear, you know, as others have pointed out, you know, the mixtape was hip hop's original mass medium. It helped it expand even beyond the initial 5 boroughs of New York. I was getting mixtapes, you know, down in Maryland, you know, where I was growing up. You know, I mean, it was like at least for the East Coast, you know, maybe at least initially more than the West. I'm not sure exactly. But the mixtape was huge. And when I came in, you know, fully got involved, it was the late 80s, early 90s, and the transition from Ron G, Kid Capri, and then DJ Clue and the CD. And the clue, you know, and you could just hear that all down the street, and you know. But within that, and feel free to add any more to that history if you like, as I ask you this part, but within the explosion of the mixtape came a figure, Justo Faison. And could you talk a little bit about his importance, you know, both as a DJ, but a curator, just as a particular fan of the mixtape, his particular role in relationship to this history?
Yeah, sure. So Orpheus, that's his first name. So Just O came from Just O, like just call me O.
Right. As in not Orpheus.
Please don't call me that. Yeah, Justo. I met Justo while I was working with the Clips. And I met him because...
That's right. We didn't cover that. You mentioned the industry, but you were working with at least in terms of, you know, some that we might have heard or known about or remember, the Clips. And this anyway.
Yep. So I was working with the Clips. My family's from Virginia Beach, my dad's side of the family. So my cousins down in Virginia grew up with Pharrell, the Clips. So when I started dabbling in music, my cousin was like, yo, come on board. And I was like, first I was a little hesitant, but eventually I did. And so I started working with the Clips, and I was like his assistant. I was in New York. I was the only one in New York. And I lived near all the labels because I lived in Manhattan on 14th Street. And I just started, it's the music industry. Like, you can do everything. And I did that. I started throwing parties, all types of crazy stuff. But basically helping with their day-to-day. Eventually that turned into me like booking their tours, doing like PR, like we had publicists, but when you have issues, when artists can't put out music, when you're fighting with the label, you got to come up with plan B. And our plan B was a mixtape. So the Clips, we got it for cheap, was their mixtape series. The first two were with DJ Clinton Sparks, who you can now see spinning on like E.
That's right. Yeah.
But he was also co-owner of a website called Mix Unit, with a gentleman named Mike Rios. And they were like, their website, that's where you went for your tapes. So you would like buy the cover and like get the tape for free, right? Because selling it is illegal. But they also
just real quick, I don't mean to interrupt, but that is an important point here, because for a lot of us, for a long time, the mixtape was seen as an underground, alternative, countercultural, from the streets, authentic, organic, whatever all those terms are. But at least for me, come to find out later on, at least there's a turning point where the industry does get more involved in using it as underground marketing to drum up that authentic street buzz before the commercial release. So there was that gray area of technically it's illegal, it's copyrighted material that's being distributed, but the industry didn't really have a problem with it, because in fact that's what they wanted to generate that advertising.
And in the Clips' case, we were having an issue with our label, Jive Records, and could not put out the album. So doing a mixtape was our only option. Clips were always on tour a lot. I work with my cousin, Jeezy, Anthony Gonzalez. They were on tour a lot. They're good artists to book, but at one point it just wasn't enough because we weren't putting out any new music. So this mixtape came out, and my friend Nancy Byron, who was a publicist out in Texas at the time, she worked with like Chameleonaire and Paul Wall, and she said, I said, Nancy, the guys are putting out this mixtape, but I was like, I have tapes in my living room and I don't know what to do with them. We had the online distribution because we had Mix Unit. But I lived on 14th Street in New York City. A few blocks west of me was like one of the biggest mixtape hotspots. Like that's where you go get your DVDs and, mixtapes and stuff. And then Canal Street's not too far. So she said, you need to talk to a guy named Justo. And I was like, who the heck is that? So Justo and I met. We met on St. Mark's, 8th Street, but on Broadway. I literally remember what I was wearing. So this like multicolored little fur coat. It was weird. And Justo was in his white Lincoln Navigator. And he was like, are you Summer? And I was like, yeah. And that's, yeah. And he was very clear. I said to him, that I work with the Clips and they're putting out a mixtape and I need help. And he was like, well, I'm going to let you know something. I don't like the Clips. I don't like their music. K Slay doesn't like their music.
Oh, wow.
I was like, all right, well, I'm not asking you to like their music. I just need you to help me.
Right. I wasn't asking for notes, my man. I just need to get the stuff distributed.
Well, anyway, Justo ended up helping me. We drove around, like basically hit the tri-state areas, like distro people, like individual people that like handle distribution, but also like Burkina. Just, I don't even remember, like just different mixtape spots, like places that I would have never even, like I went to Canal Street, I went to 14th Street, you know? That mixtape extended the Clipses tour. And like inadvertently like got them their next deal. Yeah.
Because the mixtape would, I mean, because just again, if people may not be clear, especially in New York City, where you have millions of people, I mean, are at least theoretically being exposed to it, and that, of course, being the center of what's hot and what's cool and what's mimicked around the country and around the world. It gets then, radio DJs would pick it up and start playing tracks from it, and magazines start writing up about, doing write-ups, and and then all of a sudden, like you say, it can extend a tour, it can develop obviously that's how 50 Cent is famously, how he emerged is one of the most, I think famous examples of who bubbled up just out of mixtapes. But yeah, I just wanted to supplement that, little bit that obviously it could do that. And this, of course, introduces you to Justo. Yeah.
Right. And the thing about it is, like, sometimes on mixtapes, like, that music is, the Clipses mixtape was, the beats were not theirs. You couldn't, you can't really play that on radio. But what that did was it took care of the people. I mean, New York City is such a huge hub. People, I know the stories, right? Before heading back out of town, you go pick up tapes and go wherever you're going, right?
Right. Yeah.
Like you look at drugs and mixtapes. So.
And in fact, one of the things that I know that interested me in the study of the mixtape was that, just to that point, people were punished in many cases as if the contraband were the same, as if they were trafficking in cocaine or heroin or something. And in fact, I will never forget, I was at one point when I was doing my research, I was in the city and watched a kid. He couldn't have been, if he was a teenager, he barely got there. And he was selling on the carpets, the little rug or whatever that they throw out with the mixtapes. And 5-0 showed up, and cats quickly fold up and they start running. And I saw this cop chasing him. He got away, and as the cop was coming back to that little buggy they drove over the city, I don't know what they call that thing, but that little cop buggy. Yeah. He was mad, and I was asking him, like, I just tried to ask him, like, real quick, like, what would you have done if you had caught him? Like, what is the issue? And he looked at me like I was crazy. He was like, he would have been arrested and taken downtown. He would have da-da-da-da-da-da. And he was like, and I was just thinking, like, dang, it's CDs. It's not dope. But the reaction seemed very similar.
Yeah, I think there was a moment when there was a long time when it was okay. Like, you went to Canal Street to get bootleg CDs, to get mixtapes. But what happened was the RIAA, right? Like, you have artists that are on these tapes that are not getting paid. So, I mean, it's illegal. I get it, but what happened was when pocketbooks, like the fake pocketbooks and whatever else they sell fake on Canal Street, it all got packaged. The DVDs were a big deal, right? Think about like royalties people are losing from. So, yeah, I mean, if we could have had like a more complex conversation about like how these mixtapes are actually benefiting artists. But, you know, it's...
Well, I remember at the time that, you know, and I don't want to keep going because I know this isn't the topic, but I remember there was a famous, well, not famous, a Harvard study that I remember finding that showed that, without question, that the numbers were clear that people who either bought a mixtape or somehow got an illegal download, they would end up spending money, if not more money, on an artist down the line, even if they had initially gotten that artist's music for free, because there was a love affair begins, and then you start going and looking for more, and it becomes like a drug. You get the first hit for free, and then you just keep coming back for more. And they were showing basically the same thing was happening musically. So there could have been, as you said, a better conversation. But for other, you know, I think other reasons, again, we don't have to talk about today, the treatment of people involved in this was very much the same. Obviously, mostly poor and Black and brown kids in terms of mixtape distribution. But in terms of Justo's involvement, you know, there's his documentary that he made in the early 2000s that for some reason isn't even, I can't even find it online for some reason. I can't, you know, even a bootleg version.
Yeah.
I have a VHS of it somewhere. But he was documenting the importance of the mixtape, and not only in terms of promoting his Mixtape Awards, his annual ceremonies, which I'd like you to talk about, but the history of the DJs, because it was his documentary that taught me about the DJ Hollywoods and like the very early DJs involved. So he was actually, you know, he was more than somebody trafficking in the product for a business purpose, but he was a true lover and again curator of the history of the mixtape.
Yeah, he definitely. For me, after he helped me with those tapes, Justo and I ended up dating. So there was a lot of time that we got to talk about hip hop and mixtapes. And he was about 10 years older than me. So, you know, he told those stories about like when I was your age, you know, but he's the one that taught me about like what I knew is I bought mixtapes on the street and I worked with the Clips who, compared to other artists, they were okay, right? But he really taught me about the history of like all of it. And I was like, what? Like I had no idea. I had tunnel vision because I was working with artists that were already established. So that's when I started to really like, even then, like I was still, like I was looking at my old mixtapes. My first mixtape I bought was a Ron G cassette. Like the one I actually went and bought, not something I got from somebody. And then that's when I started, you know, like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. So throughout all of that, Justo's apartment, like he had a lot of mixtape. It was like a museum. So that's kind of like, I was like, wait a minute, this is like a museum. So it was just a lot, but there was a lot of history that he let me know about. And then I actually got to experience the Mixtape Awards because I had never been.
So tell me a little bit about that, because I never got to go.
Yeah.
I've seen them online. I've heard them talked about, heard clips of it.
Right. So I went to one. The one I went to, compared to what I have heard, was very tame. And so Justo, not only was he a DJ, but a lot of DJs end up going and getting work from labels, usually as like record promoters, right? Where you go to push a record. You want DJs to break your records. So that's what Justo did. Labels would go to him and say, hey, we need this record promoted. So usually they'd be like, hey, take this vinyl, right? Go to the club. What Justo started doing, because he recognized that the DJs were putting a lot of time into mixtapes, he started really targeting music for mixtapes. And mixtapes he saw that mixtapes were actually breaking some of his records. And he also realized that the record labels were not giving DJs their credit. And as a DJ, like, you know, he was like, I'm gonna stand up. I'll give them awards. So he started the Mixtape Awards. And there were different categories. There were, you know, categories for West Coast DJ, Best East Coast DJ. We talked about earlier, female
right
tape DJ. Artists got awards. It could be like a West Coast artist. There was international, like there were a bunch of different awards. There were also named awards. So if a DJ got an award 3 times, he would name the category after them. So there was like the Star Child Award, and there was a few other ones. And this started to, first, it made DJs say, oh, wait, like we have something that we can look forward to, right? Something that's helping us look at ourselves more than just a DJ that's pushing artist records, right? Something that's making us feel like we felt when hip hop first started, right? Because at first, hip hop started with the DJ, right? So it put the focus back on the DJ, and the music industry started listening, right? Because who came to these award shows? The DJ, of course. If you were a smart artist, you'd be there too, because that's how you could push your records, be on screen, and network and meet people, you know? So the award show I went to was at BB King's on 14th Street. And it was interesting. A lot of, mostly men. It's very, but it was entertaining, and it was a place to network.
But you know, just as you were talking, I mean, you mentioned it, you know, off air, we talked about my pet peeve just in my private, personal life of always wondering, why do we separate gender categories for particularly non-physical, you know, things like emceeing or DJing? Why are we saying? But just as you were talking, it occurred to me, I don't know, I should have thought of it this way before, but it occurred to me that maybe this is a good way of highlighting groups that are traditionally ignored. So instead of saying we should just have women judged as against men and everybody else for, best DJ, maybe it is important to say, here are a group of women DJs who, even as we're talking about who's going to win this award, will highlight all of them who are collectively, probably more or less marginal. So anyway, I just in listening to you explain it, I've just done a 180 on my lifelong pet peeve in terms of how we.
Yeah, but I think it really depends on what what we're talking about, It's complicated, but it's something, these are themes that are coming up as I'm documenting the history of the awards. Like the women, do you see women in pictures? What years did you start to see? I also we're looking to see when he started the female category.
Right.
And Titanic, who when Justo and I were dating, I did not meet Titanic. Knew about Titanic, but hadn't met him. Justo had given Titanic my laptop to fix. He was like, my friend, my homeboy, he could fix it. I got you. So he took my laptop. And I don't know if it was the last day I saw Justo was Mother's Day of 2005. And then that's when he he was going on a trip to promote, I don't remember what label, but he was promoting a record. So what he was doing was going from up north, hitting all the radio stations, going south. And I talked to him every day. I had to get on 3-way with him in Philly because he got lost with a friend of mine. And then the next day, you know, a couple days later, like he was in Maryland. He went to go see DJ Lonnie B, who is the last person to see him. And ironically enough, you know, his accident happened in Virginia, which I can, you know, consider like my second home because that's where my family's from. I had spoken to him the night before, you know, and he was like, you know, I want to drive a little further because I want to go to like, it was a family member's house rather than staying at a hotel. So basically he was calling me to like keep him up, you know, and we're on the phone. I had my BlackBerry, big, thick BlackBerry. My BlackBerry had like diamonds on it. I had like blanked it out. But earlier that day, I had given my charger to someone, a friend of mine, you know, and didn't even think about it until the next day. So he calls, we're on the phone, my phone dies. And I'm like, damn, I don't have a charger. So I was like, I'll talk to him tomorrow. And the next day, like at that point, like I still had like the big back computer and like the dial-up connection. Whereas now we have like push alerts, right? You can see the messages you're getting. Eventually I got my phone back. And then that's when I found out that Justo had died in a car accident. And it was Pusha T from the Clips that called me to say that he had heard it on the radio. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, I was just on the phone with him. So I'm like, of course, like my phone, like, I'm just like, so I'm like on the computer, like, and I just remember like, as I'm on the phone with Pusha, Nancy calls me. Nancy is who introduced us, the publicist. She called because she thought I was with him. I had dropped off in Virginia. Have him come get me on the way back, but I didn't go. And when she called me, because Pusha, you know, he had said that, and I was like, I don't know what you're talking. And I was just like, and then I ended the call, but she called, and when she called, that's when I had a visceral reaction. I'll spare you the details. But that's when it settled in that he was actually dead. And it was, I just remember, like, I don't remember everything, but I do remember, like, Grouchy Greg from All Hip Hop hit me up, and SOHH.com. A friend of mine was working there, and that's when the news articles started coming up, and it was crazy. It was so crazy.
Yeah, I can't even imagine that. And honestly, I admit I honestly didn't know you all had that relationship. I didn't even know. Yeah.
There are people that knew, you know, like his friends, my friends, or whatever. I was in the music industry. Like, I'm still all the time. Like, that's the best way to be, because it's like, yo, I'm good. I got me. Like,
right.
You don't have to talk to the guy. You can talk to me. Like, I was raised to be that way. So for me, that was like, you know, yeah, it was really hard to talk about for a long time. And I realized recently, in the last couple of years, that it's because I hadn't grieved. You know? So I think, and I remember talking to K Slay and him saying to me, because I realized like he had fallen asleep. And then the guilt started to, and I was like, oh my gosh, like I could have saved him. If K Slay had not said, Summer, if you do not shake yourself out of this, he was like, you could have actually been on the phone when it happened. You know, like my phone died, but I could have been on the phone. So basically within a couple minutes of my phone dying, he fell asleep at the wheel. What's crazy is I had been telling him that he needed to go to the doctor because I thought he had like a sleep disorder. And he was planning to go. So yeah. But anyway, so.
Well, I'm personally glad that not only that you're sharing this, I appreciate it, but I'm actually kind of glad on a slightly lighter note that I'm hearing a version of K Slade that I don't think I've ever heard either, because for a long time, to be honest with you, I've never met any of these folks in person, but I was a big fan of K Slade, not just because of his DJing, but I really liked the attitude. And I, for a while, was even jokingly borrowing his moniker by saying, I'm Jared Ball, AKA Slap Your Favorite Professor. You know what I mean? Like I really loved his whole, so to hear this side of him, I think rightly, reminding you that this can't be put on you is nice to hear. We don't get to see that. At least people like me don't get to see that side of K Slade, That's not the persona we get in public. I just remember, honestly, I was at a conference with Davey D, and I happened to be standing with him when he got the word. And I only vaguely knew of Justo, to be honest, at the time, and I didn't even, fully appreciate his at the time role in all of this.
Yeah.
But I saw, obviously it was sad, and then I saw the impact immediately that it had on Davey and everybody else, and it's just unfortunate. It's terrible. I appreciate you sharing a little bit about that and about him.
After he passed away, Titanic, his friend who Titanic did the awards with him, did all the music for the documentary. We actually did one more award show at the Apollo. And it was insane. But I met Titanic, I think at like the wake, and he was like, Summer, I have your computer.
Oh, wow.
You're Titanic. You're the hacker. So we met, and he gave me my laptop, and we talked for like maybe 10 hours. And we just talked about Justo. And I was like, well, what do you want to do? And he's like, I think I just want to do the awards. And he was like, like, you're in the industry, so maybe you can like help. And I was like, sure. I realized later that after the award show, that wasn't what it didn't fulfill me to do that. I needed to do more. And that's when I was like, all right, I need to do something. And I didn't know, but I was like, Mixtape Museum, go. And I still didn't know what it was. But I knew it took me back to those moments when I was in his apartment, like looking through stuff, and unfortunately all of that stuff is gone. So me and Titanic actually, now that we're in quarantine, have been looking through his old hard drive, and I've been in here, like I have stacks of like magazines and tapes, and I've been listening to all of the like tribute songs that came out when Justo passed away. DJ Doo-Wop did one, Papoose, The Game. I'm going to get those up online. And we're working on his bio, and also starting to do like oral histories and starting to like interview people about him.
Oh, that's what's up. That is fantastic news. I'm very glad to hear about that.
It's 15 years later. I'm like, Frank Jug is gone. Lovebug Starsky's gone. Like, these are two people that were very important to Justo and very important to the history of the awards. And I'm like, no, we got to go now. We have to go now. So I'm like, however we can do that, if it's a Zoom call, if it's in a Google Doc, so be it. We just need to get it recorded before we lose more information, more stories.
Listen, before we wrap up with you talking a little bit about the Mixtape Museum, there is something that I wanted to ask you that just occurred to me again as you were talking. There is this, I don't know how better to describe it, but there are differences in mixtapes.
Oh yeah.
There are, you mentioned Ron G with where I think I'm not the one, I'm not the one coming up with this, but I think it was right. Whoever I think attributed the whole hip hop R&B craze that Puffy gets a lot of credit for. I mean, that was really Ron G, putting R&B over hip hop boom bap tracks. Then there are mixtapes where the DJ is blending track to track. And then there's, the Clue effect that I call it, at least, where it was, I'm just going to get all of the pre-released hot new music, line them up on a CD and put my name over it.
He really started that, like, I call those all genres of mixtapes. And the exclusive genre, although some of them may overlap, Clue really did blaze a trail with exclusive mixtapes.
Yeah, I mean, because you talked about, the parties where you would hear, an actual party mix, those versions, and then they sort of, but I even don't remember, but even Kid Capri had beat tapes and blend tapes and R&B tapes and hip hop tapes, but then Clue, for me, as much as I appreciate whatever he is, to me personally, it was kind of like a step down a little bit. It was like, now we're just getting it's not DJing, it's just Clue, next track, but anyway.
Yeah. No, that.
So I wanted to ask, actually, if Justo ever had any thoughts about these genres or the changes in the mixtape.
Oh yeah, Justo was not a Clue fan. He wasn't. Yeah, he wasn't. He wasn't a Clue fan, and for a bunch of reasons. And one of and also for the same reason that you're saying, and that's a lot of DJs felt that way. But I mean, the thing about it is those songs were in demand from people. So really, he was doing what DJs do, right? He was feeding. he just remixed it a little bit. So there are jokes where it's just like, Clue can't DJ, blah blah blah. But Justo still, in his documentary, Clue, he did interview Clue. He did. Understand that he is important to the history.
Oh, he is. I mean, whatever my or anyone else's personal feelings are, if you're going to talk about the history of the mixtape, Clue is essential. I mean, you can't ignore him. So but I admit I'm kind of glad to hear you say that's how
I mean, yeah, and the artists went to Clue, right? Mm-hmm. They knew that he was going to, get the songs, and other DJs wanted those exclusives also. If you were a DJ out on another coast and you got that Clue tape or got that song, or you knew Clue and he was like, yeah, I got you, because you might remix it differently and give him a shout out. It's marketing.
Yeah.
So but this is what I love about, and this is why I feel like I want to document everything, even the things that, that people don't like. So I am spending a lot of time now working with people like Rich Nice, who is the first rapper signed to Motown. He also works with Sway on Sway in the Morning and has the A&R room. He is Justo's age. So the conversations we have, he's still like, nah, he shares a lot of the feelings that Justo had. But when we talk about it, he's like, oh, he might understand. I think maybe because he has like a more personal connection because he was there. So we have these debates, which is good for us in documenting the history, because we both realize we need to get all of it, and he, so it's, yeah.
Well, I appreciate that you're doing that. And obviously, and people, by the time this goes up, can just look right below your name for the address to find Mixtape Museum and your Instagram page, which people really do need to get on, because just in general, but all these latest releases that you've been putting up have really been fantastic. going back over some of this history?
Because I'm home, and I'm like digging stuff, and I'm working with the Universal Hip Hop Museum, the Hip Hop Education Center, and doing work where we are documenting histories to advise on, future exhibitions. And I'm like, I got to go through all of this stuff. And I really would love to do a clips archive. I might just do it and then be like, hey, y'all, I did this thing. I'm just putting it out into the universe now. But yeah, I'm finding a lot of stuff. So like, this has been here. This is one of my this is a bookend for me. This is
wow.
This is a Justo Mixtape Award. This is like a later version, like the statue. It's heavy. It's pretty big. This is, I don't even know, like this is from the 9th Annual Mixtape Awards, but I have a few of them. Titanic has a few of them. He gave out plaques. He gave out rings. Only a select few have rings. But like just going through and like, so I'm gonna.
By the way, how was it determined who won? What was the behind the curtains view of that?
I'm gonna leave that for Titanic.
Okay.
But I heard it was, yeah. It was
fair enough.
I think it was pretty much Justo.
Okay.
Titanic might. I don't know if he. I don't know.
Like, I didn't know. Did he get together? Did he have a little crew and they would sit back, and have a little sip and something to eat and say who.
Yeah, I'm gonna guess that it was mostly Justo, but I'm pretty sure that he might have like advised with some people. Like I don't know, but it was.
Hey, that's cool. We never know who does the academies and all of that. So maybe it should be left as a secret.
Right, exactly. But when we did the awards, the last award show on the 10th, we did have a system in place.
Okay.
I can't remember. Like Titanic will remind me. We're going to record an oral history. Like we're literally going to get on a Zoom call and just talk about.
Please.
We're just going to like talk it out because he's older than me and I joke with him that he's old, but he really remembers everything. He remembers more than me. So
please do that.
Trying to like save things, and I'm buying protective casings for magazines. I have clips, contracts, magazines, old photo shoot, like things I just had in a box in the closet. So now I'm starting to separate these things out and then cataloging them, and you might see it online. I'm thinking about maybe doing like an online like exhibit thingy or something. I don't know. But now the other exciting thing is I'm starting to work with collectors on their collections. Like now, I know I've been talking about it. It's been difficult. It's not even difficult. It just took time. There was a learning curve that I had to, go through. I just wrapped up my fellowship at Columbia, which was for the Mixtape Museum, and ended up being a really enriching experience. I wasn't able to take classes as much as I wanted to, but I was able to meet people, join organizations that have to do with archiving and meet people that actually archive. So when I'm working with collectors that are overseas somewhere, it's like, how do I help you save your collection at home so that if we need it for an exhibit or if we want to, refer to it for documentation, or we just really want to save a copy that's preserved for long-term, preservation, it's like we need to make sure that people know not to like store things on wooden shelves because wood holds humidity. Like things like that, like the normal person would not think about. So I am working with a lot of archivists to like help provide that information to people with collections.
And you also warehouse like the a lot in terms of what has been written about mixtapes. You have a scholarship section. I was looking at the other day. There's some new stuff that I was not up on. So yeah, exactly.
Behind the tape. Yep. This book, I literally have. Mars just sent me a new copy because my old copy, when I got it in the mail, it was paper. It wasn't hardcover, and the cover got torn. but I ended up marking it up and using it and making notes. So it was good to, now I have like a permanent like mixtape.
Right on.
But there's so many people doing scholarship on mixtapes, or I have encouraged people that are doing work in like memory or technology or whatever. And the thing about it is the other part of this that's going to ramp up soon is collecting mixtape memories from people. And, you know, it's any moment that you come up with that you feel like is important, whether there's media to go with it or not. I just want to start collecting. I have over the years, but we just haven't published them. So with people's permission, we're going to collect mixtape memories from people and publish them. I mean, from anybody, any genre, just because I think it's still very important to talk about, especially in a time like this. Go on Twitter. Everyone's digging in closets. Everyone is revisiting history because it's comforting. It helps you deal with grief, you know? And yeah, it's crazy. And the other part that I will add on to that is data. I'm trying to retroactively go back and collect data, or we have to create the data. I'll give you an example because it's kind of hard to explain because I'm still figuring it out. If we have, we wanted to look up the clips, right? We could look them up on Billboard. There's statistics for everything, right? But if you want to look up mixtapes, there's no data. You know, and I'm by day, I'm a database manager. I learned SQL about 15 years ago because I was like, I'm going to build a database for these mixtapes, and it turned into a job. So that's what I do at the Brooklyn Academy of Music. That's what I did at the American Council of Learned Societies. So I manage databases. So I'm always thinking about like how things connect, and it's data, right, and trends and things like that. I bet if we could gather every hip-hop mixtape on the planet, all of the things that we know to be true, some of which we mentioned on this phone, people would have to give credit to DJs and to the mixtape and to the cassette and to Justo. But it's a little harder to talk about it, you know, without having the data. So what I'm doing is I want to actually go back. Let's say you have, I'm going to use, like, I was just listening to this J-Love Method Man tape. But, you know, if to put this tape in a database, you would have the cover, the DJ, maybe the label who sponsored it, right? Method Man, he's got connections to Wu-Tang, who connects to like all the Killer Bees in the clan, right? But then you also have the track listing. What other artists were on the track listing? Where are those artists from? How many times did an artist appear more than 2 times with Method Man on a track? What medium was it on? If we could gather all of that, I already know we can't gather every tape. So what I want to do is look at it by collection. For instance, like the Cornerstone, I just had a conversation with someone from Cornerstone. Cornerstone owns Fader Magazine. Rob Stone, who started it, was actually good friends with Justo. But these tapes that they put out were sent to tastemakers in the music industry. So I have like a nice collection of those tapes. And I think from what I've been talking to them about is they have all that data. So what I'm working with a guy named, potentially a guy named Brian Fu, who's at the Library of Congress now working on this project called Citizen DJ. He's also, and data-driven DJ. He's also does data visualization for the Natural History Museum. So we were talking about like, how could we show people very easily with the data from one of these collections, the different trends, the different you know, the different connections, right? And if we could try to we can't get to everything, but my hope is at some point we'll be able to present data and actually get some like feedback, you know? I don't know if it's like 40 acres for a DJ. Like, I don't know. Like, I just want something, you know, like, so that's.
I mean, how about even just, you know, something that was talked about for a long time. I don't know what state it's in now, but even just like a hip hop pension plan and a hip hop healthcare plan, you know, like, I mean, it's the same kind of thing we're talking about when we look at the NFL or other sports leagues. You got to go back and look at the histories of the people that have contributed to the wealth creation and redistribute it back to them.
Who are out of work right now.
That's right. I mean, we even just saw that during the shutdown, certain DJs get, shall we say, allowed to spin live on IG, whatever they want. And other DJs have had their IG's accounts shut down and whatever over copyright.
Right. So if we have
they can't even work from home.
Yeah. So there are silver linings to COVID that it's time for a lot of that stuff to be done. Like, and now again, like, it's time. I have time, and all the people around me have time, and we're just going and just doing it. Because now it doesn't matter how glossy and pretty it is. Like, we just need raw data. We need, you know, it's just all content, really, right? And just gathering its legacy, right? And people just need to know.
And at some point also, I would think that executives that had worked with the Clues and others to slide these tracks to them would want to admit on the record some you know, measure of how much, you know, was generated by that effort.
And I've
in terms of figuring out how much to compensate people.
And those stories are coming out through the Mixtape Memories. So that's
Well, look, Sommer McCoy, thank you very much. It's always good to talk to you. Again, it's been too long. I greatly appreciate your work, the history of Justo Faison. We greatly appreciate that, and your continuing work in honor of him and the mixtape in general with Mixtape Museum. We'll definitely link to that here and follow and keep supporting your efforts going forward. Thank you very much again for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.